Hello there, everyone. So, it's been a while. There's a lot of reasons as to why it's been so long since my last upload. Frankly, if the most recent episode of Doctor Who hadn't have been as, controversial as it was, I probably wouldn't have made a video then either. So, this is the first, video I'm making that's directly related to video games in quite a while. There's been just, lots been going on, been frustrated, confused. There's been family issues going on, but that's all. They've just not had the motivation to make really long videos on YouTube for a while, but that's behind us now. So, what we're going to do today is we're going to discuss something that is incredibly strange: the Game Gear Micro. This is a upcoming product being released by Sega and it's like a callback kind of system, similar to how the Mega Drive Classic here is as well. It's in the same vein as the NES, SNES, PlayStation, and Mega Drive Classic editions. So this was announced a while ago on June 3rd, so a little bit late, but it's still fairly recent. But this thing is just too bizarre to pass on the opportunity to talk about. So, for those who don't know, we'll briefly talk about the original Game Gear. The Game Gear was a handheld game console made by Sega in the 90s. It did okay, but it was absolutely destroyed by the Nintendo Game Boy, like every other handheld system of that time was. However, it was technologically advanced over the Game Boy, featuring a full color screen that was actually, front lit, so you could actually see it. But this came at a higher price. It was £150 compared to the original Game Boy that was £50. And it also took 6 AA batteries that only lasted for about 6 hours at maximum, which is a far cry from what the Game Boy could do with only 4 batteries. But the biggest fault with the Game Gear, however, was definitely the poor capacitors. Now, it wasn't such a problem at the time, it's more like an issue now, because if you're looking to get Game Gear used, you'll most likely see on listings that it has no sound, or a flickering / faulty screen, or the system has been recapped, or any of the three combined. Like, it didn't have sound, but there's no sound. Capacitors of that time were notoriously poor quality. So, a lot of devices had problems with capacitors later on, and the Game Gear is one of them. So, these capacitors would obviously fail very often, and if you get a used Game Gear, it's definitely recommended you find one that has been recapped, which means it has new capacitors, because people have replaced the old capacitors with high quality new ones that shouldn't die so quickly. So to sum up, the Game Gear was a flawed, but still really good handheld system. It had a brilliant game library, and there's definitely nostalgia for this console. So, a recreation in the same vein as the Mega Drive Classic is not out of the question. But the way Sega's deciding to go around this, like the way they're choosing to do it, is incredibly strange. And in my personal opinion, just not very good. Now, Sega recently released the Mega Drive Classic, which is brilliant. There's 42 games on the Mega Drive Classic, brilliant emulation, and it's all at a pretty fair price. I mean, I'm pretty sure it was like £65 when it was first launched, which is very good for the price. Like, that was cheaper than the SNES Classic was at launch. I think it was around about the same price as the NES Classic, maybe a bit more expensive, and it was definitely cheaper than the PlayStation Classic. So, by releasing this, the Mega Drive Classic, they proved that Sega was able to make a high quality retro throwback system in a successful way, similar to what Nintendo has been doing, so long as Sega doesn't partner with AtGames, who used to make their retro throwback systems, and AtGames products are just bad. They're not very good. I'm pretty sure Sega worked with M2 on the Mega Drive Classic, which is why there's such high quality emulation. But With how successful the Mega Drive Classic was, it brings us to one problem with the Game Gear Micro. It's a minor problem, it's definitely not the biggest flaw, but it is still technically an issue. People have seen how successful and high quality the Mega Drive Classic Edition is, and people were really looking forward to seeing a new home console remade in the same way. Despite the Game Gear definitely having a fan base, there is much, much more nostalgia for the Dreamcast, the Master System, and even the Saturn. Now, yeah, the Game Gear Micro is apparently going to have an HDMI output, which you can play the games on the TV, which is definitely how you should play them if you're getting this, and we'll get into that later. But still, people would much rather have had a home console. There was a lot of people that were really, really looking forward to. I know a Dreamcast Classic is definitely the most wanted option. A Saturn Classic's a bit of a stretch due to the Saturn's very unique architecture. It can be emulated, but I'm not sure if we're really at the point where it can be successfully emulated for cheap. The Master System Classic could definitely exist as well, but the Dreamcast Classic is definitely what people were looking forward to the most. So far, it basically seems like this is just a simple product that nobody was really asking for. And that's true. It is, nobody was, as I know, not a lot of people were asking for the Game Gear to be remade, at least not immediately. It would have much rather been any of Sega's other systems. But now we're getting to the real problem with this device. Let's look at this. Just look at this for a sec. This is a scale model of how big the Game Gear Micro is going to be. It's 8 centimeters long, 4 centimeters tall, and it's 2 centimeters deep. This is embarrassingly small. Like, this is unbelievably small. Like, the Game Boy Micro was bigger than this, and the Game Boy Micro is already bashed a lot for how small it is compared to other Game Boy models. So, just for reference, just move this a sec. This is a Nintendo Switch, and this is the Game Gear Micro. Do you see the problem here? This is just stupid. But let's have a look at something else. Here is a Game Boy Advance cartridge. This is a game cartridge that is almost the same size as this thing. Why is Sega doing this? I don't understand the motivation behind this decision. If they were planning on making a full-size remake of the Game Gear, that would definitely have been more popular. I think people would definitely have preferred a full-size remake. I know that I would have. But the original Game Gear is quite a bulky system. It's pretty big. So what I think would have been the best way to go about this would have been if they made it similar size to a modern day smartphone. That's kind of like a size of a portable device that's really acceptable. I would say no bigger than the Switch, but around about smartphone size would have sufficed perfectly for this kind of device. But this is just embarrassingly small. The Dreamcast VMU, which I've had here for a reason, is the same size as this. This isn't a game console, this is a memory card. It can play games, but it's not like full-on games. It's like little mini games that you can get alongside full Dreamcast games. The Game Gear Micro is going to be playing full handheld games from the 90s, and it's just stupidly small. I think if it was smartphone sized, it would definitely have worked a lot better. But even if it was a little bit bigger, like if it was even just a tiny bit bigger, it could have worked. But this, I'm sorry, I don't see a market for something like this. There's just I don't know anybody personally who wants to use a microscopic game console that isn't, the VMU. And again, that's not to play full games. And I'm pretty sure the VMU screen is going to be bigger than the screen on this thing as well, so keep that in mind as well. Oh, but it gets worse. Now, let's bring back the Mega Drive Classic here. This had 42 games on it, like I said before. The NES Classic had 30 games, and the SNES had 20. So you'd think, based on that, I'd say the minimum amount of games that any of these retro throwback systems should have is 20. I don't think you can get away with less than 20 and, actually charge it for full price. But the Game Gear Micro doesn't have 20. So how many does it have? Does it have 30, 40, even 50? More? 4. Yes, you heard me right. 4. Whose idea was this? 4 games? No. This is just stupid. You could fit most of, if not all of the Game Gear library on a 512GB micro SD card. And if you couldn't fit them all on that, you could definitely fit them on a 1TB SD card. Micro SD card. Easily. But no, we get 4 games. Now, I know this is small, but you telling me you couldn't have put a micro SD card slot on this? Nowhere? You could have, in my opinion, you should have got rid of the HDMI port and just had a micro SD card slot there. That you could probably give access to it, but just have a micro SD card in there where you could have 50 games or something.